thing. That
All right. I
got
forgot I
it.
was doing that for David, the other David.
Got it. So anyway, I just want to say I think this is a much broader context about all of being and including empirical being, that we have the objective horizon established for that, and he's focusing on the pure aspects of it in respecting Kant's text, which grounds of possibilities in a pure imagination.
Thank you, David. James Cook.
Yeah, just about Nick's comment. This is not all invention by Heidegger. This is all in the text by Kant. I want to read the paragraph where he talks about the relation of being and not non-being. There's only one experience in which all perceptions are presented as being in a thoroughgoing and law-governed coherence, just as there is only one space and one time, in which all forms of appearance and all relation of being or non-being, not being, occur. When we speak of different experiences, then though these are merely so many perceptions, all such perceptions belonging to one and the same general experience. For the form of experience consists precisely in this thoroughgoing and synthetic unity of perceptions. And this unity is nothing but the synthetic unity of appearances according to concepts. Concepts, including a priori concepts. So this is not Heidegger's idea. He's got all these ideas are coming from Kant.
Thank you, James.
It's not customized to sound like being in time.
Yeah, I think that concepts is actually the next area I want to take us to on 61. He has a paragraph here. Here we go. The authority of the categories must be determined through the elucidation of their essence. As pure representations of unities within a finite representing, they are essentially dependent upon pure synthesis and hence upon pure intuition. In other words, the solution to the problem, which was formulated simply as quaesio juris, exists in the unveiling of the essence of the categories. They are not notions, but rather pure concepts which, by means of the pure power of imagination, refer essentially to time. To the extent that they are this essence, however, they constitute transcendence. They are formed with the letting stand against of. For this reason, they are in advance determinations of the object, i.e., of the being insofar as it is encountered by a finite creature. Ooh, I feel like there's a lot going on there. So, I guess the first question, categories refer essentially to time. So, I don't recall, I remember the table of categories. I think it was the table of categories on the left side of the page in Kant way back when. But is he saying that the categories refer to time because Kant or Heidegger, I'm not sure which one, puts more of an emphasis on the form of intuition of time over space? That's one question. The other question is, he seems to say, I thought this last sentence, for this reason they are in advance determinations of the object. I thought that he was here talking about where a priori comes from. I don't know if I'm reading that correctly, but yeah. So those are kind of my two questions here: how the categories refer to time, and this question of that because of all of this, that I'm not really understanding too much. Because of all of this, that these are all the reasons why they are determination of objects, as long as it's being encountered by a finite creature. So, David S.
Right. Yeah, I think he is more directing us towards objectivity than the question of a priori. The a priori is the underlying, but the question is, how do objects arise and how is Kant doing the transcendental deduction? So this is, again, this is an exposition about the text of Kant. And this is what he's looking at. The categories are object related. They are things attributed to objects. Real objects we perceive have certain concepts attached to them. And when we talk about them, they are all built out of these concepts. There are these pure concepts and then empirical concepts on top of that. So they subsist, which is a relationship to time, which is from an a priori understanding of what it is for you to have your consciousness, your transcendental apperception being a constant. You can understand what it means to persist across time, from experience, from moment to moment to moment. So all of experience of objects is built on a category like substance. The categories are about objects. They're grounded in your a priori intuition and unification of inner sense, which is time. So it's temporal. That's what he's saying here.
Okay, thank you,
That
Dave, for
answer?
that. Yeah. Yes, in a way it did, yes. Thank you. James Cook?
I don't have much to add. This is early in his analysis. I think the idea of space only applies to Kant says the idea of space only applies to empirical objects. So we can't really apply space to pure concepts, and and we can also apply space doesn't generally apply to the categories, maybe to quality and quantity perhaps, but mostly quality. That's about it, right? So that the idea of or like in terms of determinately, it only applies perhaps just marginally. So that the pure concepts, which include the categories, is what Heidegger is referring to, and he's saying that it is by the reference of pure concepts to time, just as exactly the same as perception would apply to time. Would it is what the to this extent, the categories constitute transcendence. So this is kind of like message that Kant is sending, and these saying the transcendental deduction is kind of like to try to get us to look at the categories as a means of creating transcendence. Thank you.
Thank you, James Cook. Nick?
Yeah, this is a little confusing to me as well. But the idea, the concepts, one of the things about Kant is that concepts come from the understanding. So intuition, what other things? You can get maybe representation, but no concepts yet. Concepts are produced by the understanding. The categories belong to the understanding. And I'm not clear how this relates to the time, power of imagination, essentially to time. I wonder if he's talking about applying one of the categories that is time related, maybe like causality is time related. There might be some other things that are also there, but at the end of the day, we combine all these things that are produced by apperception into concepts, and the concepts are the atoms of thinking and the atoms of understanding. But somehow I believe what he's trying to say again is that this categories thing and this whole is a bed for us to start seeing objects or being. I think this is kind of like it's a background or bed for it. It isn't that we have already determined the object, but that we and I think maybe Dave's suspicion might be right that he is, because many people object to Kant saying you don't have access to objects in themselves. And a lot of philosophers after that, from the from the German idealists like Hegel, Schelling, all of them wanted to have access to the object in themselves and to unify subject and object. And I believe probably Heidegger has the same kind of agenda again, but that's just a suspicion.
Thank you, Nick. David?
Yeah, I don't know if it's in this work, but I think Heidegger has no such problem um, about the thing in itself. He says it's perfectly fine. We know everything about the thing in itself. It's the part of the, object we don't know anything about. That's exactly what it is, and we know that fully. I mean, we all think it, and so I mean, he's sort of comfortable with that as part of being. But I just want to point out the transcendence here, just in case we haven't said it. This is not exactly the term transcendence that appears anywhere in the Critique of Pure Reason. This is Heideggerian transcendence. This is not transcendental or transcendence. I mean, it's the transcendence Kant doesn't deal with, because this is phenomenological transcendence. This is being distinct from the subject, which is, I don't know why he's not dealing with it, but he's saying this is like, we have an ontology. So we have the notion of things being transcendent, distinct from us. And that's what he's dealing with. And this is not transcendental deduct. This is not that. Transcendental means something, I think, really different in Kant.
I think that's a good point. I'm glad you pointed that. It isn't transcendental, it's transcendence. Okay, good. Makes sense, more sense.
James?
So the idea of transcendence here for Heidegger, and I would say for Kant as well, is the letting stand. Is this letting stand against? In other words, it's the idea of subjectivity, which somebody objected to. The idea that things happen in the world partly because we are phenomenologically aware of them, as David brought up. So this transcendence wouldn't occur without us. And in there's a paragraph where Kant expresses that there's a complete difference between empirical transcendence and pure transcendence. And here Heidegger is talking about the pure transcendence of the categories and defining them very much according to Kant's specifications. They are not notions, but they're concepts invented by the power of imagination, as that essence, they constitute transcendence. And he means not empirical transcendence. He means these are a priori transcendent based on time. They can be applied across empirical being, empirical objects. They can be applied against pure objects of the mind. So they're not the categories themselves are not limited, but the meaning of Kant and in the transcendental deduction, which is what Heidegger is referring to, is that there's a separation between empirical transcendence and pure transcendence. A priori, yeah, pure transcendence, yeah.
Phil?
Yeah, I think what David brought up is very important, and I want to ask him a question about it. And that is Heidegger trying to use Kant's idea and then transform it and bring it down to earth, and in a sense bring about kind of like phenomenological transcendence in relationship to a kind of like conceptual transcendence? Or is he criticizing it and sort of like, no, he's talking about different thing, the real important thing is to talk about this other thing. I mean, what is he doing? Is he violating Kant by, in a sense, borrowing his terms and then switching it to another dimension? Or is he trying to unify what Kant is saying by adding another dimension to it and saying, this is really what should be talked about? So that's kind of important for you to explain your idea of what he's trying to do, because that's kind of an important distinction, I think. Yeah, Dave?
David?
All right, I'm going to go with what I think James Cook's already said. I think this is an examination, this critique, to give you a deeper understanding of what Kant discovered and said, and Heidegger will state his uncomfortable, or extensions. He'll be clear, I think, about it, but he's just at this point telling us what's going on that Kant didn't even say in words.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Brent?
Yes, I'm very impressed with the ability of the members of this group to be able to navigate through Kant's terms. That's something that I cannot do well. And I've read the material, and I'm pretty sure I have an idea of what he's talking about, that I do understand it. But unfortunately, it seems that I understand it in Heideggerian terms, and that's probably my fault, because I've read too much Heidegger. So it's hard for me to think of Kant in Kantian terms. But I do know that, if I can briefly speak about David Hume, who was very influential upon Kant, in the sense that he knocked Kant out of his dogmatic slumber and forced Kant to make a reply to David Hume's skepticism. But Hume talks a lot about habit, that we come to know principles like causality through habit, through over and over again experiencing certain things in a certain way, and therefore we make inductions, not deductions, but inductions from the objects that we encounter every day. There's a lot in common between habit and time. Habit is consistent, it's constant, and it's repetitious, which are all qualities of time also. But there was the big difference between Hume and Kant is that Hume believed that we could use induction, that we do have access to things in themselves, and therefore we can make, to a certain extent, inductions about principles of reality, so to speak. For Kant, however, we don't have access to things in themselves. So consequently, we have to have something transcendental. Something has to transpire. Something has to make its entry into our cognition in order for us to make deductions. And in a way, it helps me to think of Kantian time as a transcendental concept of habit. I don't know if that fits in what Kant said, but it helps me to think about that.
Thank you, Brent. James Cook?
Yeah, just briefly, I really liked what David had to say about about Phil's question, and the only thing I would add is I definitely see this book as a graduate seminar. This is not an undergraduate seminar. This is for graduate. This is a graduate student level seminar on Kant, and he's just simply bringing explanations to the graduate students of his reading of Kant, which is extremely detailed and conceptual, and I don't think it's original in terms of his clarity. The only thing that's really original about, I think, Heidegger's reconceptualization of Kant's words is the clarity that Heidegger is actually bringing to the thoughts of Kant in the transcendental deduction. The book is really difficult because it has so many sections. And it's hard, even if you're reading the book, it's hard to look at the headings and feel, why does it have that heading? You know, and it drives you nuts. What does this heading mean? Why is it there? What is he going to talk about now? Is he really talking about that, or is he talking about something else? So this is a explication, you know, for the graduate students that he's teaching. These are lectures. That's all. I just wanted to point out that, you know, David gave a good explanation of the conceptual part of it. But I just wanted to, the other part of your question was, what is Heidegger's project here? He's teaching people Kant, but he's teaching them the ontology of Kant, which was part of his one major part of his project that's been ignored, that had been ignored. It was understood by some of the commenters. Casserier talked about the Kant's ontology, but in general, there was this not full, there was no full conception of what Kant's ontology was. And that is what, that he's bringing it more from the ontological, Heidegger is bringing it more from the ontological perspective, in the words of Kant, what was being said.
Thank you, James. Nick?
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of respond to Brent, and I think that's a very good way of introducing Kant, with because Kant agreed in a way with Hume and realized the problem of causality out there, because things can be looked at out there as just being inductive and being custom and habit. And the way he went around that is that, you know, the world out there, if they have objects in themselves, we have no access to that. However, what we do have access to is appearance. And appearance is how the world looks to us. And because appearance is what empirical science also deals with, by the fact that it's the thing, the object that looks to us, then us brings in a big part of how we explain what's going on in the world. And this is why he introduced his doctrine, his view is called transcendental, not transcendence, transcendental logic, transcendental ethic, and so forth, because he puts in to the subjective what you would have expected out there in the world, like causality, the categories, unity, oneness, and so forth. Those are things in our, in us, subjective in us. And whenever we see appearance, this is our way of explaining what's going on. We need the causality to explain things, but that is the thing that we add in through our categories that is in us. What is out there in the world as thing in itself, we are never really sure of. But if we deal with appearance, then it is appearance to us, and us has the right to put in these structures, these categories, because that is how we can make sense of the world. I think that is what essentially transcendental, I think, means for Kant, to be distinguished from how logic or other things, you know, the common way of looking at the world. Anyway, I hope that helps too.
Thank you, Nick. Phil?
Yeah, I want to thank all of you, actually, you know, because right before this discussion about this part, I was ready to throw up my hands and say, God, you know, do we have to go back to Parmenides about how things are actually not real? There's a difference between the world and the world of ideas. But thanks to all of you, you know, you have pushed back Parmenides once again, and we are now dealing in a more advanced way of thinking about the relationship between the transcendence, transcendental, and the horizon. So thank you very much. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Phil. Let's go to Dan, and then we are moving forward.
Yeah, to me, the main difference here is what is this, like, this unity or synthesis happens. So in Kant, it happens in representation, in our conscience or in our mind, and we have time, space, we have categories, we have, I don't know, reason and sensibility or senses, and we put together, according to Kant, we put everything together in our representation or in our mind. For Heidegger, this is trying to explain this to us, and he said, actually, that's not where the unity or the synthesis happened. It happened already outside of us. It happens there in time, and that's the project in being in time. And Kant said, Heidegger said, time is outside of us. It's not a form of intuition like in Kant. And there in time, everything comes together, and when that happens, we kind of the synthesis already happened when we apprehend the beings. And then according to kind of Kant, project is coming too late. Already we have everything together. And Heidegger is trying to say that to us. And I think that what also Heidegger is saying, like the categories are temporal, is saying they are not distinct from time. If you are a Kantian, the time and categories are living kind of in different worlds. But if you are a Heideggerian, time is the basics, is the basis. They are the foundation, and categories also have this time dimension if you look closer. And Heidegger is going to do it, I think, in a different book, and shows that all Kant categories kind of, they can be reduced to time. And that doesn't make any sense in Kant's world, because their time and categories kind of are different. One is in sensibility, one is in reason. And they have nothing in common according to Kant. But Heidegger said, no, they come together there in time, and time is outside of us. And that's where everything comes together. And one more thing, like when he said that, like for Heidegger, object is a bad thing. Object is something that the subject creates. Like when subject, we in our conscience, we have this Kantian project. We prepare like, I think Nick said that we have this kind of projection where we have our pure, I don't know, intuition and reason and so on, and we prepare the everything for the object to appear. So the object is our construct. Object only appear when there is a subject, and the subject is already equipped with all these pure notions. But for Heidegger, that's nonsense. Like all this pure stuff to Heidegger doesn't make any sense, because it's kind of like we as a subject, we create the object, and that's bad. So Heidegger is going to talk about things and beings instead of object, and that's to him is the way to transcend this object-subject dispute. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Dan. David, I'm going taking us to 20. If you want to make your comment afterwards, go for it. Let me just read the section. In general, making sensible means the manner in which a finite creature is able to make something intuitable, i.e., is able to create a look, image from something. According to what and how something comes into view, look or image means something different. First of all, image can mean the look of a determinate being to the extent that it is manifest as something at hand. It offers the look. As a derivation of this meaning, image can also mean the look, which takes a likeness of something at hand. Likeness, i.e., a look which is the after image of something no longer at hand, or a look which is the premonition of a being to be produced for the first time. So, image, look. What are we making? These I'm pretty sure are not Kantian terms. So yeah, what are we looking at here? Making sensible. I think in chapter 19 it says that being perceivable is making sensible. David?
Right. Perceivability. Yeah, so one thing I wanted to respond to the last caller was that Kant is interested in discussing what kind of knowledge we can have, not so much in what kind of being things have. He parses out empirical being, physical, things, and intellectual being and ideas and stuff like that. So, that's not his project. His project is telling you how much you can know about each thing you encounter. So he doesn't arm wrestle with these questions that Heidegger is sort of, but Heidegger is deeming it necessary to file these down to a specific shape so he has a phenomenological handle on how far Kant has gotten and what ontological assertions he's made. So that was my response to what was said. I think we passed over in 19 some really big stuff about how concepts work and how objectivity works. And I think Heidegger is employing his developed notion of our encountering being in general. And he talks about that being in time with the terms foreclosing and foreconceiving and forehaving. The foreconceiving means that when we encounter something knowingly or understandingly, it already has what Kant would call a sort of concept attached to it, a way of being that can be unfolded temporally. And so the temporality of Kant's concepts give temporality to everything being encountered. And now we're talking about the making sensible. I'm not sure here, because I thought we were going up to 19, didn't know we were going to 20, but he was talking about this look before. What's appearing to us in the encounter with things is they have a previous structure that we are given. They leak it to us. They give it to us. They offer it to us, and he isn't willing to, I think, plant a flag and say, well, this is Kant saying everything perceived. You get the sensation and you have the concept of it. That's what it is to have the experience. So now he's talking about the types of making sense of something in your being, things that are present at hand. I'll stop.
Thank you, David S. James Cook, just out of curiosity, where did you think we were reading till tonight?
I went to 23 just to be
Okay.
safe. I didn't.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
didn't have that much confidence that we would. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just curious in case I said something different. I was going back on it. Yeah, go for it, James.
Yeah. This is kind of to me, he's kind of just explaining the connection with the look and the image as a look, as a for concept, or as a something no longer at hand. For example, just the image and the derivation of the image in time. How in empiric, he does talk later on about the empirical image. I think how it is. We know it's real because it changes. The image changes. But he's comparing that to the idea of schema. He's introducing the idea of comparing the idea of a schema. What is a schema? And Kant's terminology for schema. Kant has a lot of terms: build signs, build this, build that. That means picture. But the schema and the schematism is the adapting this idea of objects changing in pictures, in images, to the idea of pure concepts that wouldn't have specific images of themselves, but being organized schematically. So he's easing us. Kant and Heidegger are easing us into that concept of schemas of pure concepts, or schemas of categories. Schematical investigation as part of categorization, or using the categories. That's not a term I don't think Kant uses, but in the idea of the analysis of the categories and how they can be used, the subsuming of things in the categories, how they rely upon schemata. So this is a very important section in Kant's text, and a very important way Heidegger has of explaining it.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, did other people read to 23?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Bill, Nick? I don't know what they're saying.
I'm just following you, jumping around wherever you bring us, Garth.
Okay. Because I'm just wondering whether or not it stands to move forward if most people didn't read it, but we'll go on to the next little point and see what we can make of it.
It looks like Dave was trying to get us to go back to 19 or something.
It's okay. We'll just, I don't want to drag us back. There's not really a need to.
Yeah. Phil.
I think something is important said in this paragraph, and that's a categories, like for instance, we all know what a hammer is. It looks like a hammer and all that, but when you don't have a hammer around, you could see a hammer and other things, a rock or something else. You get cross categories. So the look of something may not necessarily be the likeness. It could just be the functionality of what something is. So that's important, that you're able to cross categories and say, oh, we don't have a hammer around. Could you use this wrench, or even a hard piece of wood, for it. So I think that's important, that you can cross categories too. Otherwise, you're too constricted within the category itself, and that's okay, because the right tool for the right purpose, it's actually the proper thing to do, but you have to sometimes transcend it when nothing's around. So this is what I see from this paragraph.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is all an explanation of how looking at things is a kind of a model for how we organize ideas in general. We have the empirical experience of organizing looks at objects is empirically is actually a model for the way we learn to organize things that might even be imaginary, might be things that are not found in images, actual images, but are purely conceptual. So that becomes, it's just basically the explanation of how things transition from being single images to actually collections or a schema of how things really are in the world. That there's no object, but looking at a tree that's blowing in the wind, there's no one image of that tree that shows me that it's blowing in the wind. I have to collect a schemata of trees around me that are blowing in the wind to actually realize the full effect of where I'm at and what the weather conditions are.
Okay. Thank you, James. David?
Yeah. So I stumbled over the beginning of that sentence, making sensible. And here he means making come into sense intuition, not making understandable, making sense of the world, giving meaning to things, which means seeing them within the context of being in the world and their possibilities. So this is just talking about the intuitability, which is kind of a weird, he's giving into Kant, because Kant separates these things out. He focuses on intuition, he focuses on concepts, and he separates them out. So I think he's paying, due respect to the text and the Kantian way of looking at things, if I'm understanding this right. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Nick?
No, I don't see this text as this particular thing as being it by itself. I mean, he's just distinguishing look from image, where an image is a more general thing. A look may be a look that is tied to that sensation that you have at a certain point, but an image can be that look, but it can be other looks of previously, beforehand, or afterhand. It is something that we create as an image. That's how he uses the term image in that sense. It's a more general thing. Now, where is he leading to this is the question. Why is this important? Where is it getting to? For me, is the more important question.
He's constructing the idea of a pure schema. We're going to arrive at pure schema,
Okay.
and how the pure schema are subsumed under the categories.
Oh.
Each category has a collection of pure schema, pure schemata.
Okay, then I would like to see where that, because that's probably the main point, right? That's the
Yeah,
point.
I'll try to find it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brent?
Well, I'm sure Garth will bring us there at some point. Word.
Brent?
Yeah, there's many, on any given object that we intuit in the world, there's many different ways of looking at it, obviously. And so for instance, somebody hands you a dollar bill, we can see that, oh, here's a piece of paper, or here's an example of a piece of paper in general, or this is a note that is worth $1 at the marketplace. This is also an example of other types of denominations of dollar bills. There's a picture of George Washington on it. This is a likeness of George Washington. It's an example of a president in general. So there's many ways to look at an object. Particularly, it even becomes really confusing when you go to a movie or a play and you see an actor acting the part of an historical figure. There's many, many different ways of looking at that. And it almost seems as if you have to decide beforehand how you are going to look at it. The object itself doesn't suggest to you how to look at it. You have to make that decision in yourself. So in a way, it kind of reminds me of Husserl's intentionality. Your historical or your place in time of where have you arrived at in terms of your past and how you look at the future. You come to this place where you intuit this object, and that your place in time is what helps you or makes you perceive it a certain way, to look at it a certain way. So it's a hard, the schema is a hard thing for me to really grasp, like a schema in itself, a pure schema. What does that look like? What is that? And so obviously we'll see that as time goes on in this, in our readings. Thank you.
So thank you, Brent. For anyone who has a copy of the Kant with the page numbers, it's the book 2, chapter 1, on the schematism of the pure concepts of understanding. And towards the end, and after about 6 pages or so at B 182.
B182.
Yeah, and the Kant notation, the A142, B182, he finally gets to the delineation of all the schemata and the analysis of each schemata. That was an answer to Nick's question. We'll get to the point where Heidegger starts talking about it. We're in the introduction to that now.
Thank you, James. Phil?
Yeah, I'm glad Brent brought this up, because it really connects what I was saying before on a very limited sense, now to a broader sense. In other words, how any particular thing looks depends on the context. If you trace it all the way back, goes back to the idea of the ontology. In other words, how does that unfold into a context? Because without the context, you don't have the understanding. I mean, like you have a basketball. If you don't have the court and the players, you don't have a context. It doesn't mean what it means. And so therefore the context is all important. They're related in that sense. There are formal contexts such as basketball, and there are informal contexts. You walk in nature, and then there these things appear. I guess you could say nature, But then, but in the particular context, you could say, oh yeah, yeah, we're in a national park, and deers and bears are supposed to roam around. Or if you see a bear, let's say, in a city, then like it's a completely different context. So therefore, in a sense, it's always related, those two things about how a thing is in relationship to the dimension that contains it, the context or the form or whatever you want to call it, is an important thing to give it meaning, because without it, it just sort of stands there by itself, and we don't know exactly what it means. A bear in a zoo is different from a bear in a park. So thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Phil. David? You're muted.
I think this is a Heideggerian level view of a Kantian problem, which is sort of like saying, what does it mean to say the animal is breathing? And then that's the Heideggerian question. The Kantian answers, well, the oxygen atoms, there's a loss of energy as they bind to this, and this chemical, the ATP, is created. Wait a minute. Of course, we're talking at two different levels here, but the schematism still applies when you're looking at the actor on stage and you say, oh, it's, Ray so-and-so is playing the part. You're not looking at Othello. You're applying a different set of schema. Or if you're looking at, it's a human being up there, it's an animal. You're applying the schematism of the concept animal. Whichever concept you apply, it's been built by pipes. The fact that the pipes are pipes is a schematism, but you're always doing it with a concept. So they all work the same way, and there's a pure bottom level, which is called the categories, but they're all built up from sensation added to categories and combinations of that. And so the basketball, if it's a cement thing hanging in an art museum, it's not a basket. This is not a pipe and all that kind of stuff. It's what concept are you applying to the object? It's your conceptual schema defines the object. So it goes right to the heart of being. I think in a good way, a Kantian way, but it's like we're talking about different things. I think we're talking about the same thing.
Okay. Thank you that. I am going to, the next part I wanted to take us to is in the same chapter. I don't think we're going to have enough time to discuss it, but I wanted to look and see what we have for the next meetup to see if we can okay, perfect. So for the next meeting, we'll just do we'll just finish up the fourth stage, or is this the fifth stage? So we'll go through 25, and then we will begin with and then we will begin with part 3 after that. So we'll go through to through 25 to the beginning of part 3. And I have changed the site. I'll still put it up, but it's now the Logos meetup group. So,
okay, just to be clear, Garth, you're going to start by posting on the regular website first, and once we got that, then we know how to get the access from henceforth.
Yes, I will post this link. So I'll post this link on the Seattle, Portland, and Toronto group, and then after